When I originally did this talk at the European School, the theme of the whole conference was the Great Sacrifice. So when I changed over, I just brought that name to it, the Great Sacrifice. But then as I was thinking, as I was walking here, it's not so much about, I mean, what I would like to show you is the sacrifice, but also the difference between a Nirmanakaya and a Mahatma and their ideal path that they're on, and to see if it can't help us when we have those inconsistencies in our life, when we don't understand why something's going on. This is the path, this is the ideal path that they're on. And since we've decided to take on a spiritual path, this might give us a clue to some of the things as to why we're doing this. The evolutionary path is the path that the majority of humanity is on. And I just called it the stop and smell the roses around the mountain path. So that's the one where they're going around the mountain. This is Annie Besson. They're going around the mountain, and most of humanity is not even aware that they're on a path, that they're going, or they have the goal to get to the top of the mountain. So in this scheme, the goal of the evolutionary path is to get to the top of the mountain. So the majority of the humanity is working its way around the mountain. The spiritual or religious path is the front of the pack path. This is the well-beaten, well-worn, well-guided path. These people are the parts of humanity who have decided to take up a serious practice. And they're working their way around the mountain still, but they know where they're going, and they're leading the way. And then we have the occult path. And this is the straight up the mountainside, pathless path. And this is the path of the occult. This is the path of the serious student. It's not just the path of theosophy. There's this path in different religions, different philosophies, but it's where you get off that well-worn path and take a step and start heading straight up the mountain. Now, once we get to the mountaintop, there's more. And Annie Besson talks about this as into the inner sanctum. The outer court, and you'll notice that the outer court, if you think about the mountain as this huge place with all of humanity up there, there's no way that all of humanity can fit in that outer court. It's not the goal. It's one of those things that it would be nice if everyone got up there, but it's unrealistic to think that all of humanity will get up to the outer court. So only those that are on this occult path or on this deep, serious path will get to the outer court. And the outer court is the first part of discipleship. Probation takes about 7 years, the masters tell us. Once that outer court, from the outer court, we move to the inner court. And you'll notice on this slide, the inner court is much smaller than the outer court. So not everybody in the outer court will choose to get to the inner court. The inner court is where the initiation process starts. And the literature tells us that between the first initiation and the fourth initiation, it takes 7 lives. And Pablo, I think, will touch on some of this tomorrow. Then, from the outer court, we get to the inner temple. And this is the Holy of Holies. This is between the 4th initiation and the 5th initiation. And that will take, usually, another 7 lives. So, once the disciple gets to this inner court, this holy, or gets to the temple, the Holy of Holies, and they reach that 5th initiation, then they choose from there 7 different paths. Leadbeater talks about all the choices in Masters and the Path, but what we're going to focus on is the 2 paths, the paths of the Mahatma and the paths of the Nirmanakaya. Okay? All right, so now we're in the open and the secret path. Forget what I said about the Nirmanakaya and the Mahatma yet. Okay, so the open and the secret path, One of the contexts that we need for here is one of the gifts that HPB gives us to keep our mind going is she uses the word add up in a general sense. When we study, we like to know that this word means this, and this word means that, and it means that throughout the text. Well, not for HPB. So she uses the word adept as he who has obtained, and that's what we just talked about. We talked about he who has obtained inside the temple. So what we're going to use here is Mahatma and Nirmanakaya as the difference in that general term of adept. All right. Okay. The path is one, disciple, yet in the end twofold, the open and the secret. The first one leadeth to the goal, nirvana, the second to self-immolation. And immolation means to offer as a sacrifice. So the difference between the two paths is nirvana and self-sacrifice. The secret path leads to mental woe unspeakable, woe for the living dead, and helpless pity for the men of karmic sorrow. So at the end of evolution, at the end of inside the temple, we have two choices. We have the choice to enter the open path, which we go and then we dissolve into nirvana. Or to put it in other terms, once we finish our schooling, we go on vacation, and we stay on vacation, and we don't come back. We go away to some island, some uncharted island, and we stay there. The second path, the second option, is of the renunciation of nirvana, and in order to stay and help humanity. This is the secret path. So once graduated, they skip vacation and stay back to help humanity. So the open path is the way to liberation. And so, for example, at the end of this, we're in the fourth round. At the end of this round, those that choose the open path will dissolve into nirvana, or the path of liberation. And the secret way, the way of the add-up, whether it's a Mahatma or a Nirmanakaya, is to stay as a co-worker, and we'll differentiate which way they do, what each of those do as a co-worker. So, once all humanity, what you're doing as a Nirmanakaya or a Mahatma is you're staying back to help humanity. So at the end of the evolutionary cycle, you will either have helped people to get to the top of the mountain, or they will have to take a helicopter and get to the top of the mountain, because all of humanity at the end of the evolutionary cycle will be at the top of the mountain, okay? Per se, I have to throw that in, all right? And one of the ideas here is that if we're all in the fourth grade, and by halfway through the fourth grade, we've learned everything that we need to learn. Some of us will choose to go on vacation and stay on vacation through the rest of fourth grade and through the summer. And then when fifth grade starts, we'll come back. Others of us will choose to finish everything we need to know for the fourth grade, and then we'll stay as a teacher's helper. And we can stay and help them in two ways. So we'll stay during the school year, and then we'll stay during the summer and help. And thereby, when we start fifth grade, we'll be a little wiser. We won't know more fourth grade stuff because we've learned all our fourth grade stuff. But there's an intrinsic learning when we stay back and help others. All right, what I've done here was my correspondences. I tried to do what HPB asks. So in the Exoteric View, I first had just this first part, the Exoteric View, where the Dharmakaya was the boundless and formless body of truth. The Sambhogakaya was the energy or subtle body, and the Nirmanakaya was the physical body of the Buddha. Now these are exoteric terms in Buddhism. And that was great. I could memorize that and put that up there, but it didn't make any sense to me. I couldn't make the connection. So then I started playing around with it, and these correspondences are what I came up with. So we can think in theosophical terms, we can think of the Dharmakaya as the Atmic body, the Sambhogakaya as the subtle bodies, and the Nirmanakaya as the physical body. And that's an exoteric way of looking at it. Or we can look at it as spirit, soul, and body. Or we can look at it as Father, Holy Spirit, and Son, where the Holy Spirit is the energy of God. So then I drew back and I looked at, then the Sambhogakaya is the energy of the Dharmakaya, and then it brings it down, brings that energy down to the physical plane here. Okay? All right, then we come to the esoteric view. And the esoteric view, the Theosophical Glossary tells us that the Dharmakaya is the essential body, the Sambhogakaya is the reflected body, and the Nirmanakaya is the practical body. Leadbeater puts it a little different. He says that the Dharmakaya is the unmanifested monad. So it's that spark that's still part of all sparks. And you'll see the correspondence, the first logos or the unity. So that Dharmakaya is that spark that's part of the unity. The Sambhogakaya is the manifested monad. So it's that spark that's differentiated, so we see all different sparks, but it's still a unity. And then the Nirmanakaya is the causal body or the higher ego. And this is where the sparks are now separated. So you can see each spark. So if you take, what do they call, a magnifying glass and take it to the sun, we can see each ray, and that's an intensified ray. So this Nirmanakaya is that separate ray. Okay, so now we're going to go into Nirmanakayas. Occultism says that Nirmanakaya, although meaning literally a transformed body, is a state. The form is that of an adept or yogi who enters or chooses that post-mortem condition in preference to the Dharmakaya or absolute nirvanic state. He does this because the Dharmakaya separates him forever from the world of form, conferring upon him a state of selfish bliss, in which no other living being can participate, being thus precluded from the possibility of helping humanity. So this is where we're going to separate the Dharmakaya from the Nirmanakaya. So what they have in common is their post-mortem states. So after death states, this is where it happens. So they may look the same during life, and then after death, one chooses liberation, the Dharmakaya, and one chooses to stay back and help humanity, the Nirmanakaya. But they both lose physical contact with humanity. The Nirmanakaya will never have a physical form here on earth. The Nirmanakaya gains nirvana, but does not merge in it completely, but instead retains an individual vehicle of consciousness. That individual vehicle of consciousness is called the Nirmanakaya. And he does this in order to stay in touch with humanity, like I said, although not directly. Most of us believe in Nirmanakayas, those great adepts of the past ages who, renouncing their right to nirvana, remain on our spheres of being, as complete spiritual human beings, save their corporeal, visible envelope, which they leave behind. They remain as they were in order to help poor humanity as far as can be done without sinning against the law of karma. The law of karma can never be taken away. We were at the Ossifest in the U.S., and there was a guy advertising to cleanse your karma, to take it away. And actually, he was quite busy. So, and that goes back to the caterpillar butterfly story that Murray talked about. And I always think about that. If too much help is given, it doesn't give us the strength that we need. The Nirmanakayas, although that they're on the subtle planes, they do not come down to contact us. We have to raise our consciousness to be able to be in contact with them. Although they do give a force, and we'll see later, they do give a force to help humanity. Now here in the second quote, they talk about the Nirmanakaya, who has so purified his whole system that he is above even the divine illusion of Devachan. We have to remember that the purpose of Devachan is for rest, recuperation, and assimilation. Once a being has reached the level where they don't need to assimilate everything, that they've gotten all their faculties, they can bypass Devachan. And that's what the Nirmanakaya does. We can think of Devachan as a mini nirvana. So what they do is they bypass that and stay working. The other thing that I want to stress is that they're invisibly assisting, and they're also called the liberators of mankind. What we don't understand, because we don't know what life would be like without their help, and although we think life is sometimes really hard with their help, so we can't imagine that they're actually helping, but the Theosophical literature tells us they are helping. And what they help with, and we'll see this later on, is that if they weren't there to help guide us or give us inspiration, and you can see that in scientists or artists that have this great burst of inspiration and something comes out of it, where through trial and error, or as they'll tell us in here, through trial and failure, it would take much, much longer to get through. Another example that I can give here is that the Nirmanakayas are like the benefactors of a university. Once we go through the university and graduate, they're the ones that disappear, go to work, and then give money back to the university so that the science department has proper equipment to use. If they didn't give that money, if we didn't have those benefactors, then we wouldn't be able to update our equipment, and any experiments or anything that we're working on would take a lot longer, or our education would be lessened. All right, their work, the guardian wall. The guardian wall, or the wall of protection, it is taught that the accumulated efforts of long generations of yogis, saints, and adepts, especially of the Nirmanakayas, have created, so to say, a wall of protection around mankind, which wall shields mankind invisibly from still worse evils. So one of their main jobs is this guardian wall of protection. This generation of spiritual force is one, for the benefit of mankind, and two, as a reservoir that the masters can use, or their pupils can draw upon in order for assistance. And Leadbeater says, the great hierarchy of adepts is entrusted with the dispensing of this force for the good of the great orphan humanity, and it is upon this that they draw when necessity arises. In order to serve mankind, they live a sentient life after death and suffer immensely at the sight of human miseries, most of which, being karmic, they are not at liberty to relieve, for the sake of having a chance of inspiring a few with the desire of learning the truth and thus saving themselves. And we've all experienced the human miseries that just tug at our heart, and there's nothing that it seems that we can do about it. But as Pablo mentioned, by doing our work and doing our best and trying to make that personal transformation, we can use our energy more exponentially to help the human miseries, even here before we choose to become Nirmanakayas or Mahatmas. And then for an example, Jacob Boehme, who was a 17th century Christian monk and a theosopher, was the nursling of the genie Nirmanakayas, who watched over and guided him. So that's just an example in the writings that HPB gives us of somebody who was influenced by the Nirmanakayas. Okay, that's Nirmanakayas. Mahatmas. The definition of Mahatma is a great soul, an adept of the highest order, exalted beings who, having attained to the mastery over their lower principles, are in possession of knowledge and power commensurate with the stage that they have reached in their spiritual evolution. Okay, what is a Mahatma? A Mahatma is a personage who, by special training and education, has evolved those higher faculties and has attained the spiritual knowledge which ordinary humanity will acquire after passing through numberless series of incarnations during the process of cosmic evolution. And here HPP says, I said and repeat that they are living men, not spirits, or even Nirmanakayas, that their knowledge and learning are immense, and their personal holiness of life is still greater. Still, they are mortal men, and none of them live 1,000 years old as imagined by some. So here she really delineates what a Mahatma is. A Mahatma is a person. It's a human being. He or she is a human being, and he or she will die someday. They're not spirits, and this was mentioned because around the time there were the spiritualists who thought that these spirits, that the spirit guides that the mediums were contacting were actually the Mahatmas. And so she makes a distinction, and I believe even the Mahatma letters, they make a clear distinction that this is not how we will contact people. In the days of old, the mediators of humanity were men like Jesus, Paul, Apollonius of Tyana, Plotinus, Porphyry, and the like of them. I always like this because this gave me that concrete examples. I could say who, I could picture in my brain. They are adepts, philosophers, men who, by struggling their whole lives in purity, study, and self-sacrifice, through trials, privations, and self-discipline, attain divine illumination and seemingly superhuman powers. So here, their purity, study, self-sacrifice, trials, privations, and self-discipline. If we believe in the idiom as above, so below, well, this is what our life is, those trials and those tribulations and those sufferings that come to us are coming to us for a very purposeful reason. And this also shows the difference between the occult path. The occult path, one gets both illumination and powers. And it's as opposed to the mystic path, where the mystic path, all they're getting is illumination. All right, their sacrifice. The adept, or the Mahatma, has the option of renouncing conscious nirvana and rest to work on earth for the good of mankind. This he can do in a twofold way, either by consolidating his subtle body into the physical appearance, he can reassume the self-same personality, or he can avail himself to an entirely new physical body, whether that of a newly born infant or by entering a deserted sheath and living in it as long as he chooses. So there's three ways that a Mahatma can retain the body. One, by consolidating the etheric body and retaining the same personality, simply updating the outer cover. And I think of this as Mahatma 2.0. All right, or by being born as an infant. And if he's being born as an infant, his powers or his affinities will show at an early stage in life. And but there still is the struggle, because we talked about that horse. We still have to tame a new horse. And number three, by taking the body of someone who has just died. And there's an example of where HPB, it is said that when she died, she took the body of a young Indian boy so that she could learn Sanskrit. Once again, when the Mahatma does this, they have to tame that horse once again, so it's a struggle to be in the physical body. All right, they are willing to be, again and again, subjected to misery, imprisonment in flesh, and all the sorrows of life, provided that by such a self-sacrifice, repeated throughout long and dreary centuries, they might become the means of securing salvation and bliss in the hereafter, not for themselves, but for men. Misery and imprisonment is because of the physical body. If we think that we're a surgeon, or that we're a great artist or piano player, now that is our true spark. That is who we truly are. So now we have to come down into matter. So once we come through mental matter, it's like our bare hand being put on a surgical glove. We still have most of our ability to use our hand. Then we get entangled with astral matter. Now we're putting on a winter glove. We put on a winter glove. We still have our dexterity and we can still move around. But once we get entangled, our divine spark gets entangled with the boxing glove, okay? We're going to, in the physical matter, we put in a boxing glove. Being a surgeon or an artist or crocheting or anything like that is very difficult. But we here on the physical plane don't know that we have boxing gloves on, so we just figure this is the way life is. But a Mahatma knows what it's like to have a bare hand and to work with it. So to come back into the physical body or even into the emotional body or the mental body is a sacrifice and takes some energy or take some time on them instead of staying on the more spiritual planes where the work exponentially grows. So remember, the salvation and bliss is not for humanity, not for themselves, but for humanity. And the sacrifice to me, it doesn't seem like something that can be put upon somebody. To me, it seems like something that's compelling, like you actually can't do anything but that. So given the choice, you would think, I don't have a choice. This is what it is. There's nothing else that I can see. So it's that sense of duty or that responsibility that there isn't a choice. Okay, I will be busy night and day, morning and noon and evening. This is for everybody who dearly, dearly wishes for a break, who's thinking, am I ever going to get a break? Is life going to ever slow down? Well, this is the reason. You're in training to be a Mahatma. So I will be busy night and day, morning, noon, and evening. At times, I feel a passing regret that the Chohans must not evolute the happy idea of allowing us also a sumptuary allowance in the shape of a little spare time. Oh, for the final rest, for the nirvana where to be one with life, yet to live not. Alas, alas, having personally realized that, one does long for eternal rest. So this is a small digression into complaining, and this is kind of showing that human side of them. Now, you won't hear this from a Nirmanakaya, all right? A Nirmanakaya is more like a contemplative monk who's gone off to a monastery to work on that part. While the Mahatma is the minister or the priest that's staying inside of working day to day with the congregation. All right, their work for humanity. The adept hierarchy has definite and indispensable purpose and function in the development of the human race. To keep open the upward path through which descend the light and leading without which our race would require to make each step by the wearisome, never-ending method of trial and failure in every direction until chance showed the right way. In fact, the function of the adept hierarchy, or the Mahatmas, is to provide religious teachers for the stumbling masses of mankind. And the way I looked at it, the Nirmanakayas provide the force behind the light, and the Mahatmas provide that pathway for us. The development of the human race, remember our goal or purpose is to evolve back to that self-aware unity, to get to the top of the mountain. And we can't do that. We can't do that once we're just this stumbling humanity inside this giant, massive crowd. So what we don't realize that if it's not for the adepts, remember I said before that our struggling would be much more difficult. It would be longer and more difficult. I'm going to talk about the religious leaders in a couple slides. On the inner planes, this is where the Mahatmas do the work. I looked at it as a difference between we want to build a city up. So we don't build the city up by the construction workers. The construction workers do all the heavy work and they do the physical, but they can only build building by building, brick by brick. But if we bring in a set of architects, they can draw out the whole plan of the whole city, and that's where their energy is best used. And then the workers get to working. So when we're working here on the physical plane, the vibrations are heavy. We know that there's more of that tamasic energy down here. As soon as we get up to the emotional plane or the mental plane and can take off the boxing glove and our winter glove and our surgical glove, then we can do much more work. And that's the same with the Mahatmas. Their energy is much better utilized on the subtle planes or the inner planes than they are here on the physical plane. You know, it shows that in the Mahatma letters, you know, how many people did they write to because it took so much energy. So Sinnett and Hume, and there is a big list of people, but they wrote to specific people that they thought could affect the masses down here or affect more people down here. But as soon as they're able to pull back, their energy can affect more of humanity. How do the adepts guide the souls of men? In many ways, but chiefly by teaching their souls direct in the spiritual world. Why on the inner planes? It is a law of occult dynamics that a given amount of energy expended on the spiritual or astral plane is productive of far greater results than the same amount of energy expended on the physical, objective plane of existence. Now, there is a universal law that says that action and reaction are equal and opposite. As soon as the Mahatma opens the door to work here on the physical plane, the opposite forces, the forces of the Brothers of the Dark Lodge or the dark side, also have a doorway. Now they have a doorway or a portal to come here and work. So every time there's an equal force given, the opposite, or every time there's a force given, the equal and opposite force is allowed to come into. At certain regular periods, they try to give the world at large a right understanding of spiritual things. One of their number comes forth to teach the masses and is handed down to tradition as the founder of a religion. Krishna was such a master, so was Zoroaster. So were Buddha and Shankaracharya, the great sage of southern India. So was the Nazarene. So here's our nice concrete examples of religious leaders that come. But they only come every few centuries. And they teach them to the masses. And what they have to do is what Renee had talked about, what we should do in our lodges. We need to adapt to the language and the culture and the times. And that's what these religious leaders did. They adapted the teachings to the culture and the language at the time. However, they were to teach to the masses. And when you teach to the masses, you can't teach deep subjects. So this is more, these religions are more of an exoteric view. But that is not the only work of the adepts. At much shorter periods, they send forth a messenger to try and teach the world. Such a period comes in the last quarter of each century, and the Theosophical Society represents their work for this epoch. These spiritual leaders, or these spiritual teachers, come at the end of every century. And I always wanted to go back. If there was a historian, I know there would be a way to go back and find the subtle ways that were helped at the end of each century to see where this force came. Unfortunately, we really don't even know who or what came at the end of the 20th century, the 1900s, to help humanity. But the Theosophical Society was definitely what came at the end of the 1800s to usher in the new millennium. And these forces that come every 100 years or so, have more of an occult emphasis. Taking disciples. There is an enormous, almost limitless responsibility from the moment they begin really to teach. From the instant they confer any power on their pupils, they take upon themselves all the sins of that pupil in connection with the occult sciences, whether of omission or commission, until the moment when initiation makes the pupil a master and responsible in his turn. Thus it is clear, while the teachers are so reticent, and why chelas are required to serve a 7-year probation to prove their fitness, and develop the qualities necessary to the security of both master and pupil. So this is both for the work for humanity, this is both the work for humanity that they do. They take on disciples. And that is also their sacrifice, because as they take on the disciples, they take on the energy of that disciple or the karma of that disciple, so that if the disciple goes wrong, there still is that magnetic link to him. And I always think of the example of this. I thought of it with the Mahatmas also take on the karma of any project they started. So Mahatma KH and Mahatma Maurya take on the karma of the Theosophical Society. So if the Theosophical Society would all of a sudden turn into a school of psychic teaching of powers, they would have to take on that karma of it. So in knowing this, I thought about the karma that Jesus must take on from what's happened to Christianity. And it really it kind of made my heart sad, but then it also gave me, because like a lot of people in the U.S., we were raised good Catholics. And then, since we couldn't find the answers we were looking for, we left Catholicism to look for something else. So this really gave me the reason to go back and look at Christianity and look at it in a deeper, wider aspect, to see that maybe if I couldn't help lift that burden that Jesus is bearing, his cross, anyway. So when the pupil is given premature powers and he turns to the dark side, then they take on that energy, that karma of that person. And it's just like in Star Wars. I love Star Wars. So since Yoda was the trainer of Darth Vader, he took on that karma. So Darth Vader turned to the dark side. So I have a couple examples of political work. A crisis, in a certain sense, is upon us now and must be met. I might say two crises. One, the societies, the other for Tibet. For I may tell you in confidence that Russia is gradually massing her forces for a future invasion of that country under the pretext of a Chinese war. If she does not succeed, it will be due to us, and herein at least we will deserve your gratitude. You see then that we have weightier matters than small societies to think about, yet the TS must not be neglected. So that is a great example of a world thing that the Mahatma has to think about, and then in the back of the mind they still have to make sure that the TS is going. And I have some friends who are Russian historians, and they couldn't find anything in Russian history where a tragedy like this might have been averted. So all I can think is that Mahatmas must have really did a good job if we didn't know anything about it. The second one, though, the Egyptian operations of your blessed countrymen, and they were talking about the Englishmen. I don't have to feel guilty about reading this as I did when we were in England. Involve such local consequences to the body of occultists still remaining there, and to what they are guarding, that 2 of our adepts are already there, having joined some Druze brethren, and 3 more on their way. I was offered the agreeable privilege of becoming an eyewitness to the human butchery, but declined with thanks, for such great emergency is our force stored up. So one, this is talking about the force that's stored up, this force that the Nirmanakayas kind of are making there. So one, it's talking about this force stored up. So the Mahatmas or the adepts had to use this force stored up to kind of bypass this. And if you look at the year, July 1882, I looked it up, I Googled it on Google, and it was talking about the Anglo-Egyptian War in 1882, which started in July and ended in September of that year. And there was a British victory there. So what also happened here was they were guarding something which we don't know, and I think they eventually left. They left here, or there was someplace else that there was something that they had to leave because it got so bad. And then the third one, Nevertheless, it is our firm conviction, based on historical evidence and direct interferences from those days, that the French Revolution is due to one adept. It is that mysterious personage, namely the Count de Saint-Germain, who brought about the just outbreak among the paupers and put an end to the selfish tyranny of the French kings. And we all know about the French Revolution, and this was the first attempt of the Mahatmas to bring about a social change through humanity, and it kind of went a little through politics, for humanity through politics, and it kind of went a little bloodier than they would have liked, but the change occurred. So we can look at this being the attempt in the 1700s of that spiritual force to make a change at the end, because I think, who's a historian, when was the French Revolution? Was it the end of the 1700s? I believe.
1769.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. This is for both the Nirmanakayas and the Mahatmas. And this is the Great Renunciation. Indeed, an incessant, conscious, self-sacrificing throughout eons and ages, till the day when the eyes of blind mankind will open, and instead of the few, all will see the universal truth. These beings may well be regarded as gods or gods. So this is, remember, the renunciation of nirvana to stay and help humanity, either as a Nirmanakaya on the inner planes or as a Mahatma on the more heavier planes. So that's all I have, except I do have, I did make a handout, I forgot about, that kind of summarizes everything. And since we have a little time, this is a slide I omitted just because it will take a little looking over. So once you have that. Okay, so this top part up here just gives the definitions that I gave, where you can see that the Nirmanakaya and the Mahatma reach enlightenment and decide to renounce nirvana. And they stay working for humanity within their karmic limits. And that the Dharmakaya is an adept that reaches enlightenment and after death decides to merge into the absolute, never again to be in touch with humanity. All right, and then these kind of dotted boxes explain a little more what happens. The Dharmakaya drops all individual vehicles of consciousness. The Nirmanakaya drop just the physical body, the etheric body, and the emotional body. And they work mostly on the mental plane or the mental plane or higher. They retain a subtle body created during occult training, and I grilled Pablo because I wanted to know what that subtle body was. If it's not astral matter or it's not, lower mental matter, what is it? And the best that we came to was that it's in occult training. There's some training that teaches you to consolidate permanent atoms in order to make a body that can be receptive to other bodies on the higher planes. So that's, and then the Mahatmas have a physical body by either consolidating that etheric body, that's the Mahatma 2.0, by being reborn, or by inhabiting a body, just like HPD did with the Indian boy. Then we go here to the Nirmanakayas, their work. They work on the inner planes. They fill the reserve, the force stored up, and are part of the guardian wall. And then they inspire chosen individuals, like the example of Jacob Bentley. All right, then the work of the Mahatmas are to either incarnate as a religious leader, as Jesus, as Krishna, as the other examples, to take on disciples, and we all know of the disciples of the Theosophical Society, and or to inspire political, scientific, and cultural movements. So this is the flashes of inspiration that the scientists or the politicians or some other movement in there that gets. Down here is, oh good, that was easy. Okay, down here is the part that I didn't go over. The true or the permanent Nirmanakaya is just what we said. One who reaches enlightenment and dies, renounces nirvana, and drops the emotional body and physical body and stays working on the inner plane. All that I just said right above that. But now there's a temporary Nirmanakaya, and here we're using Nirmanakaya as a general definition of beings that are on the subtle planes. So the temporary Nirmanakaya is the unenlightened initiate, so the disciple that dies. He has not yet reached nirvana, yet he chooses to renounce devachan. Remember, he chooses rest, he chooses not to rest, not to recuperate, or not to assimilate. He's learned everything that he has to learn, so he doesn't have to go to devachan and gather more. So he renounces it, and he remains on the inner planes until his next incarnation, doing work. The uninitiated disciple. So this is a disciple that is before the first initiations. But with the help of the Mahatma, he can renounce devachan. He can remain on the inner planes and remains awake until the next incarnation. Once again, either doing work or learning. Now this last category is the black magicians. This is someone who has learned how to stop the regular post-mortem process, and they stay on the astral plane as a malefic influence. So this is the dark side that we talked about. So there you have it. Do we have any questions?